Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. I've just got in from the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium after watching an absolutely shambolic and dreadful performance from Spurs, losing 1-0 at home to Chelsea. No idea it was only 1-0. Really should have been 3 or 4. Chelsea had so many chances and Spurs didn't have any, really. Apparently they had a shot. Kudos had a shot in the first half which went over. But nonetheless, they managed to record their worst ever XG, 0.05, since XG began, in terms of when we started caring about that and records began. That was back in the 2012-2013 season. And the worst in the Premier League this season of any team. Really underlining just how poor they were from a creative point of view. And, going into the game, there have been a lot of question marks about Thomas Frank. With regards to creativity, particularly at home. Obviously away from home they've been fantastic from a results perspective, and how he's turned it around from a team that was conceding goals for fun last season, and the way they've improved set piece wise, that he does deserve lots of credit. But the one thing that's been probably lacking throughout most of the games, home or away, is some real spark and inspiration. And you could argue that, obviously he's got all these new players, some that are struggling more than others, and obviously injured players as well, particularly in the attacking positions, so that isn't helping. But others will also point to his tactics being a bit too pragmatic, and it really today was the sort of nadir of that so far. They really, really struggled to create anything in what was obviously a huge derby against Chelsea. Obviously, every Spurs fan going into this game will have feared the worst, because Spurs always lose to Chelsea, don't they? And it's now 5 defeats in a row, 1 win in the last 14 now against Chelsea. But the sort of manner of just how limp Spurs' performance was against Chelsea. And Chelsea aren't a great team. They've got some good players, but their best player's missing. Cole Palmer's not fit at the moment. Best attacking player anyway. I think Moises Caicedo is arguably their best player. He's an unbelievable player and had a fantastic game today, to be fair. But there was still an opportunity there. And whilst the result is disappointing, the performance is far more concerning, I think, from Spurs' point of view. Chelsea were utterly in control throughout the game. Like I say, how it was only 1 goal, I'll never know. I mean, Vicario was a big part of that. He obviously made some cracking saves. João Pedro did score the only goal of the game, should have had a hat-trick. Had the good chance in the first half, which was a top save from Vicario. Was denied by a good Vicario save in the second half, which was a bit of a sitter. The biggest sitter was Jamie Gittins, the sub. I don't know how he sort of fired that over towards the end. And there were other chances for Pedro Neto as well. So Chelsea, as Frank said afterwards, were definitely well worthy of their win. Spurs very much second best, but that doesn't really underline just the manner of the difference between the two sides today. Let's talk about the goal itself and Javi Simmons. I mean, anyone who's been watching these videos that I've done of late know that I've been pretty critical of Javi Simmons since he's come here. I just don't think he's really lived up to the billing that he has had since signing for 51.9 million. I can't really think of any games where he's really lit it up. I did say against Newcastle, I thought there was some encouragement in that game. I thought he was performing a bit better, but that was being quite generous. The bar is very low with Javi Simmons from what he's done so far. He didn't really create anything that much in that game. He did have, I suppose, a potential assist for Sarr, but it was more encouraging rather than anything that would blow you away. Well, today he was poor. He wasn't even going to start the game. He only came, but he did come on within 7 minutes because Lucas Bergvall got this blow to the back of the head from a clearance and had to go off from concussion protocol. And it was quite something, actually, watching this unfold, because he was being checked by the doctor for a good few minutes, and then he really, really didn't want to come off, to the point where he was literally shoving the doctor, saying no. And no, you could see him saying, no, I don't want to come off. And then unfortunately had to go. Was forced to go off, with which Thomas Frank obviously backed his medics and the decision afterwards. But then Javi comes on, and you're thinking, particularly against the club that everyone thought he was going to sign for this summer, Chelsea, when he ended up at Tottenham. Now's the time to really grasp the nettle. Now's the time to show what a playmaker you can be. Chelsea is a difficult team, but this is the time to really stand up and be counted. And I think that's one of the things that's frustrated me most. Not the only thing the main thing that's frustrated me most has been the careless passes, and we'll come on to that in a minute from Javi Simmons. But it's just the way that you want from your playmaker, in the way that James Maddison talked about last season about wanting to be the guy who carves the dinner at the the turkey at the roast dinner table. Like he wants to be the main man. You need that guy to be the main man, to stand up and be a bit of a peacock, I suppose, to a certain extent, and say, look, I'm going to go and take this game by the scruff of the neck. We've seen none of that so far from Simmons, and today was, about. I mean, you can hammer the whole team, so it seems unfair to single him out, but it's the fact that he has had this lack of impact so far, so frustrating. But the thing that really has bugged me in quite a few matches so far, and I've mentioned it a few times, is the carelessness of some of his play. Some of his passes have been so lax and lack of focus. Kind of thing that particularly a technical player like him should be easier to iron out, but he keeps doing them game after game. And so far, it hadn't cost them, and today it did. So there's a multitude of errors in this goal that they concede from João Pedro, all instigated by Moises Caicedo being fantastic. But Simmons, I think, is the biggest culprit, along with Van der Ven. So to paint a picture, Spurs is kind of messing around with it on the edge of their box. Jed Spence kind of sort of attempts to dribble it out. Caicedo wins the ball off him for his first interception in this lead up to this goal. Gives it to Pedro Neto, who aims a hopeless ball, to be honest, going forward, which goes to Van der Ven. And you think, okay, they'll get out of it. Van der Ven plays the ball to Javi Simmons. Simmons then makes his mistake. He's trying to play it back to Van der Ven, but his pass is so careless. It's so short. It's just not hit hard enough, and suddenly puts Van der Ven under pressure. Van der Ven then makes the next big mistake by not just whacking it clear and getting rid of it. He attempts to sort of try and dribble his way out of trouble. Caicedo, far too good a player for that, intercepts, takes the ball off him, drives into the box, and manages to cut the ball back to João Pedro, a player who's seems to be, should be low on confidence, having not scored for, I think it's 8 games, 10 games including the country. Hadn't scored since August the 30th, but this was an absolute gimme, and he fires it, puts it away, 1-0 for what proved to be the match winner. And after that, you think, okay, setback, another frustrating moment for Javi, just to focus on him for a minute. Maybe this is, from now on, can you step up? Can you sort of show what you're about when Spurs really, really need it? And there just really wasn't anything. And when he was subbed in the sort of 72nd minute, I think it was, which is a bit of a, it's always a bit humiliating, I guess, for players when they've come on as a sub. I mean, Frank made the point afterwards that he came on so early. And in fact, he's played quite a lot recently. He really, it was nothing in it. There's no sort of story there in terms of a sub being subbed. And as I say, the sort of embarrassment of that. But to be honest, I was surprised he didn't go off earlier. He was so ineffectual. But then again, Spurs don't really have a lot of options off the bench. I think that's part of the problem with the way they're playing at the moment. You're starting to look at the players on the bench. And yes, they're still missing Solanke. Yes, they're missing Kulusevski and Maddison, albeit when are those guys going to even come back? Who knows if Maddison's going to play again this season? Kulusevski, maybe he comes back before the turn of the year, but how long is it going to be before he's even in a position to be playing well for Spurs? Bear in mind how long it took him to get back from injury last season. And Solanke, same goes for him, really. I mean, been injured pretty much since pre-season, hasn't really had a pre-season as a result. Do we really expect him to come straight into the team when he's finally fit, whenever that is, and be able to light it up straight away? I'm not sure. So I feel like this malaise from a creative point of view and the attacking players' point of view is set to continue, really, particularly as the games start to increase in volume and the matches they've already played, they start feeling them in their legs. Injuries start to bite as they have been. I mean, it's a bit gloomy picture, really. Anyway, so that was the goal that obviously lost them the game. But tactically, Frank, he said they were going to attack from the off, so they weren't going to sit back. He made a big point of that in yesterday's press conference, where he sort of bit back at the suggestion that they might do. But I mean, they didn't have a shot in the second half when they were losing. They only had, I think, 2 shots throughout the game, if that. I mean, my good friend George Sessions, who's just done the Tottenham Way podcast, which you should check out, him and Tom Allnut have done their review. He talks about the Spurs failing the eye test, but they failed every test in this game. They really did. There's nothing really to be positive about. And it's not a surprise to have heard the fans booing at halftime. wasn't a surprise to hear a lot of fans booing at full time. Frank did say afterwards that he understood it. But the thing that I'm not sure I've heard too often in matches was they were booing literally in the match. And it was after a specific moment. So obviously Spurs chasing the game at 1-0, or should be chasing the game at 1-0. They've got a free kick, which Vicario is going to take I think we're into stoppage time, after 90 minutes now. So you've got to get downfield. Plays it to Spence, who suddenly is, he's pressured by a player who, I think it might have been Joao Pedro. There's already booing starting. He then lays it back to Vicario, who ends up lumping it down the pitch anyway, goes straight through to Sanchez. So it's a complete waste of a moment. And from that moment, Sanchez then releases Chelsea up the pitch, who ends up with I don't know if it's Esteval or Joao Pedro ends up laying the ball off to Jamie Gittins, who one of the worst hitters you'll see this season. It really should have been 2-0 all from that moment. And that moment with the frustration, with the booing, really encapsulated what a sort of diabolical performance this was, and how difficult this would have been for anyone connected to Tottenham, and particularly for Thomas Frank going into this match. Spurs were also lucky not to have 10 men. Talk about Caicedo being fantastic. He ran the show against Spurs' midfield of Bentancur and Paulinho. Couldn't get near him, really. But Bentancur should have been sent off, I think. I think he was very, very lucky. It was right in front of him when he basically, I wouldn't call it stamp, but he basically plants his foot on Reece James's foot. You could hear Reece James sort of howling in agony straight away. And then you watch it back and it looks worse. It looks even worse in the replay. So I'm surprised he didn't get a red card and only a yellow card. But there we go. Spurs managed to get away with that, I suppose. And just, from the attacking perspective, I know there are mitigating factors, and Frank keeps bringing them up. It's a new sort of front four to a certain extent. Players trying to feel their way into the team. Obviously, I've mentioned Javi Simmons' struggles. But it just feels like a lot of the time, there isn't, at the moment anyway, there's not a lot of sort of routines and smart tactical play at the top end of the pitch, in open play anyway, and it seems to be a lot sort of relying on Mohamed Kudus to do something really good. And whilst he's a top player, and I've gone on about him a lot this season, it's not like he creates loads of chances. He's more just really good at holding onto the ball. He has a great shot on him. He's brilliant at beating a player. So he has his strengths and he can create chances, but he's not someone who's going to do it every game. And they need other players to step up. They really do. I thought Kyle Mwani was okay today. I quite like how mobile he is, perhaps compared to Richarlison. But I suppose it's still too early to really be assessing him at the moment. But it's not like he, again, gave much to be particularly enthusiastic about. But I feel like whoever plays up front for Tottenham at the moment, with their lack of creativity and ideas going forward, they're going to struggle. It's going to be a challenge for them. At the end, I asked Thomas Frank after the game. It's funny, like you get all the fans saying, "You got to ask this, you got to ask this," and we did ask all the questions that people were asking for, but you got to do it in a sort of way that is, you want to get a good answer out of the manager, and you don't want to just humiliate him. That just won't really get you anywhere generally in life, I think, but particularly in press conferences in the Premier League. But I basically said, look, what can you say to fans who are concerned about the creative approach at the moment that can give them confidence going forward? Which is basically gives them a chance to talk about this concern that people have over their ineptitude today, at least from an attacking point of view, and just generally in a lot of games this season. And he just said, look, he came back to the same arguments he said before. 4 players, the front four are still getting to know each other. It's early days, but he said, it will get better. He's sure of that. It is going to improve and it will click effectively. But I have to say, it is hard to see at the moment. And it's been hard to see for a little while. That's not to say, those who are sort of calling for Frank to go already. It seems that's obviously way too soon. You've got to give him at least a season. But this is a difficult period. And it's more to the point that I feel like it's going to be a while before it gets better. Because when you look at the fixtures coming up and the way they're playing at the moment, with this being probably the worst performance of this, definitely the worst performance of the season, there's no sort of time on the training ground really to sort of iron these things out. would give you loads of confidence that suddenly everything is going to click at any point soon. But there you go. I mean, the other thing that I haven't even touched on yet, which was arguably the biggest talking point or moment from the game, actually was after the game finished, was this potential flare up between Van der Ven, Spence, and Thomas Frank. So Frank's going onto the pitch, going to go and applaud the fans, which he makes a thing of, which hopefully fans appreciate, whether it's going well, badly, whatever, to at least, thank them for their support. And it looked like he was trying to urge Spence and Van der Ven to go over to them to join him. And they looked like they basically blanked him, basically snubbed him and walked down the pitch, walked down the tunnel and left the pitch, obviously frustrated after that performance. Frank basically tried to downplay it in his press conference afterwards. He sort of praised Van der Ven and Spence for their contributions this season and said, everyone reacts differently. But there's no denying it. It didn't look good. It looked disrespectful. It doesn't smack of a really sort of cohesive unit at the moment. Look, I'm not going to start saying there's sort of fractures within the dressing room, and that was that showed that. But I guess it's on them to going forward to show how together they are really, and how much of a cohesive unit and a friendly camp they are going forward. But maybe others will just look at it and think, well, that just shows you how much they care and how frustrated they were. I don't know. Depends on your point of view. In fact, I'd be intrigued to know your thoughts on that particular incident. Let's go on to a few of Frank's comments afterwards. So he was asked about the XG, as I say, 0.05, the worst in the Premier League this season, Tottenham's worst on record. And he said it hurt massively. He said that he's never been in charge of a team that has created so little. He looked embarrassed, to be honest, by it, as well he might. He said they performed badly. They lacked energy. They lacked intensity and freshness. And he also kind of had a bit of a dig towards his team. He said that they didn't do well with Chelsea's high pressure, bit of a tactical speak here, but high pressure, even though they'd worked on it all week. He didn't go too strong, but it was kind of the suggestion that, guys, we worked on this all week and you've really struggled to implement what I've put forward. That was clearly one of the big parts of their problems today was how Chelsea's press and just the midfield and Caicedo in particular, they just really struggled to handle him. And then, just looking at this home form this season, I mean, that's the fourth bad result at home. Bournemouth was the first. They lost 1-0. It should have been 3 or 4-0. And I remember interviewing Alex Scott of Bournemouth a few weeks later. He was saying Bournemouth that day just felt like they were on one of those games where they just felt unstoppable and could do anything. But that was a really poor performance. Wolves wasn't a defeat. It was 1-1, but only thanks to João Paulinho right in the last minute. And that was another really poor second half. After they conceded the goal, they looked all over the place. And that was one of the other things I neglected to mention today is he tried to change it numerous times from a tactical perspective. It looked to me anyway. Nothing seemed to work. And it seems just a bit chaotic and sort of scrabbling around and searching for ideas and solutions, as he put it, with the way his team is playing and the personnel at his disposal, but not really coming up with answers that solutions that work, I guess. Then there was Villa at home 2-1. I actually missed that game, but he seemed to be less down on that particular game. And then this is the worst lot, Chelsea 1-0. But it really should have been, Chelsea really should have had at least 3, I think. And then there have been other games away from home in the Champions League. Bodo Glimt 2-2. They sort of salvaged a draw there. Monaco 0-0. Another game I wasn't at, but it wasn't for Vicario. They definitely should have lost that game. So I think for a long time people have been saying that this team is sort of overperforming their the way they're playing from a results perspective, particularly in the Premier League. I mean, they're still fourth, 17 points. They still dug out some very good results. Think of Everton. That was whatever way you say about how they went about winning that game, win 3-0 away at Everton. It's a fantastic result. So I still think it's not just like, oh, they'll suddenly lose every game going forward once that sort of the rub of the green goes the other way. No, they've earned those victories, hard fought, just done in a way that is not particularly aesthetically pleasing, but very effective with the set pieces and the solidity at the back. But I have to say today, anyone who talks about Frank playing too safe or too pragmatic, well, that's not the case. I know they lost 1-0, but it should have been 3 or 4-0. It was just poor all round. And then when you look at the fixtures coming up, Copenhagen at home, that's suddenly become a big game. They haven't lost in the Champions League, but they had opportunities away to Bodo to put themselves in a better position. Copenhagen, a team they very much expected to beat, obviously a fellow Danish team for Thomas Frank. But the way they're sort of struggling at home at the moment, their lack of creativity, means that might not be as easy as people might have hoped. Man United at home, United suddenly picking up form and suddenly digging out results as well. It sounds like at Forest today, they weren't bad, but definitely in a few weeks ago when they went 2-1 behind, they would have gone on to lose that game. I think Ruben Amorim said that after the match. But they got a draw and they almost nicked it. So it feels like things are changing for them a little bit. And they've got quality players going forward. Brian Mbeumo is someone that Frank knows so well. Then obviously the North London derby, Arsenal away, and I don't think any Spurs fan is feeling particularly confident about that game right now. PSG followed after that away from home. Then Fulham at home, who, again, obviously a match you expected to win, but everyone knows that Fulham have some decent players and a savvy manager, which can make this a difficult game. If you remember, Ange last season, that was the first game after the 4-0, I think, against Man City. Was Fulham at home. You just think a bit of momentum, and they drew 1-1, and it was the start of a really, really bad winter run. So Spurs know what it's like to sort of come unstuck against them. Followed by Newcastle away. No need to talk any more about Newcastle away. Spurs always struggle there, it seems. And then Brentford at home against his old team. I mean, it could be a bit of a sticky period for Tottenham, and it's going to really take every ounce of Frank's tactical acumen that he's built up through his time at Brentford, and hopefully can implement here. He needs players to step up. He needs key players coming back. Obviously, Romero was back in the squad, but didn't play or didn't start. He could obviously come on towards the end. He's going to need his leader, his captain, for these games going forward. And, he needs players like Mawani to suddenly have an impact. Obviously, Javi Simmons to have an impact, and things to start clicking a bit more. It's not sustainable, I don't think, to rely on purely set pieces and defensive solidity to finish to get a Champions League qualification in the Premier League. For my money, I think that will elude them. They'll need more than that to make that happen. But right now, after a performance like that against Chelsea, that's the sort of least of their worries. It's about just performing just far better than that in every facet of the game. It was a really difficult night for Thomas Frank, a really difficult night for Tottenham, again against Chelsea, one that they'll hope to sort of just leave as a horrible memory. But with other games coming, typically thick and fast at this stage, they're going to have to react very, very quickly. Let's see if they can. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to know your thoughts on what particularly frustrated you in the game. Did you go? What did you think of the booing during the game? Did you join in with that, or do you think that's not the right thing to do, or do you totally understand the context of that particular moment and the lack of ambition, which I think seems to be the heart of the frustration with some of Frank's sort of tactics is they don't seem particularly ambitious from a creative perspective, and individual performances. Xavi, obviously, that moment with Van der Ven and Spence. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Always appreciate it. Cheers.